Welcome back, everybody. Today we're gonna really try to get inside the mind of Dexter Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
You know that vigilante serial killer from the Dexter books and the show?
Absolutely.
I think most people watching probably have pretty strong opinions on Dexter.
Yeah.
You either love him or you hate him, but today we're going way beyond that love-hate thing.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at Dexter using some real psychology.
Interesting.
We've got some really interesting academic essays that try to analyze his character.
Okay.
And the thing that really sticks out to me is this. Can someone be a completely ruthless killer and at the same time still have like a spark of humanity in them?
Yeah. It's a question that really gets you thinking, huh?
Yeah.
And to even begin to answer it, you almost had to go all the way back to when Dexter was a child.
Okay.
Just imagine being like 3 years old
Oh, wow.
and see your mother brutally murdered.
Oh, my God.
Like that level of trauma, especially at such a young age,
Yeah.
it has to have a huge impact on like your development as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're talking serious psychological scars, right?
Huh.
But I mean, does something like that automatically turn someone into a killer?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but it definitely disrupts these like crucial phases of development.
Okay.
So you have Erikson, this really famous psychologist,
Oh, yeah.
and he had this whole theory about stages of like psychosocial development.
Okay.
And one of the very, very earliest stages
Okay.
was this idea of like trust versus mistrust.
Mm-hmm.
So when a child experiences something as awful as what Dexter went through,
Right.
that just shatters their sense of trust.
So he like never really learns to trust the world or the people in it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And according to Erikson, if you have these unresolved conflicts
Yeah.
in these early stages, it can create a ripple effect that just impacts your whole life.
Like across their lifespan.
Yeah. So think about Dexter's relationships.
Okay.
He struggles to be intimate with people. He has a really, really hard time forming genuine bonds with anyone.
Yeah.
And he has this constant, overwhelming need to control everything.
Yeah.
And these are all things that you can trace all the way back to that trauma from when he was a child.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have this whole other layer with Harry, like his adoptive father.
Yeah.
So Harry's a police officer and he finds this like traumatized little kid with these really disturbing urges.
Right.
But instead of, getting him professional help, Harry creates the code.
It really makes you think, was Harry like trying to do something good?
Yeah.
However misguided it might have been?
Yeah.
Or did he accidentally put Dexter on this path that he could never escape from?
Right.
And the most important question is, did the code actually help Dexter at all? Or did it hurt him more in the long run?
It's such a classic nature versus nurture question, isn't it?
Totally.
Like, are some people just born to be killers or what happens to you, like your environment turn you into one?
I think Dexter's case is the perfect example of just how complicated that question really is.
Yeah.
Because he shows so many signs of antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah.
Like he's anxious, he's restless, he's deeply unable to form those real connections we talked about.
Right.
But he puts on this mask of normalcy.
Yeah.
Like he's just playing a part.
Yeah, he's always acting.
Exactly. It's all just a carefully constructed persona.
And the code itself.
Right.
The way he follows it, like it's the law.
Yeah.
Do you think that also comes from this need for control?
Oh, I think absolutely.
From when he was a kid?
Yeah. Think about it. From Dexter's perspective, the world was just this chaotic, unpredictable place.
Yeah.
So the code is his way of trying to make sense of the chaos.
Okay.
And trying to control these urges he has in this world that feels totally out of control.
So this desire to like try to control his dark side.
Yeah.
Does that actually make him more human? Or does it make him less human?
You know, that's the thing about Dexter. It's such a fascinating paradox because he's trying so hard to control these really dark urges he has.
Right.
Like he has this twisted sense of morality.
Yeah.
Which suggests that there's more to him than just being a monster.
Okay, so let's talk about that monster thing.
Yeah.
We hear these terms a lot like sociopath and psychopath.
Right.
But what's the real difference?
Well, the main difference is where these tendencies actually come from.
Okay.
So sociopathy, it's largely believed to come from nurture.
Okay.
It's about trauma, a tough environment, things that happen to you in your life.
So things that happen to you rather than things that are just part of who you are.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, psychopathy, on the other hand, that's considered more inborn.
Okay.
It's more nature than nurture.
So if we're looking at Dexter's past, the horrible childhood he had being raised by Harry, where does he fit in on that whole spectrum?
Well, given everything we know about Dexter,
Okay.
I think it's way more likely that he's a sociopath
Okay.
because his urges to kill, they were shaped by his experiences. They weren't just predetermined by his genes.
Right.
So it really challenges that whole idea that someone is just born a monster, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
So we've talked about trauma
Mm-hmm.
and how that plays into this whole sociopath versus psychopath thing.
Right.
But there are other ways to analyze someone's personality, right? Like, what about trait theory?
You're totally right.
Okay.
One of the most famous trait theories is Eysenck's model.
Okay.
It focuses on these 3 core traits:
Okay.
extroversion, introversion, and neuroticism.
So let's see where Dexter fits in.
Yeah, let's see. Dexter isn't really the life of the party, is he?
Oh, yeah, he keeps to himself.
Yeah, he's not really like that.
He's more of a loner.
Right. He likes routine, limited social interaction.
Yeah.
He likes control and predictability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all of that points to some pretty strong introverted tendencies.
But then he meticulously plans his kills.
Right.
He's super careful about covering his tracks.
Mm.
And that takes a lot of self-control, which seems like the opposite of what you'd expect from someone who's driven by these dark urges.
That's such a good point.
Okay.
Because it really shows how complex Dexter is.
Yeah.
He has incredible self-control in certain areas of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But then in other areas, he seems completely controlled by these dark impulses.
So it's like this constant internal struggle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that struggle is a big part of what makes him such an interesting character.
Yeah.
Oh, and we can't forget about neuroticism.
Okay.
Remember how easily Dexter gets frustrated when things don't go according to his plan?
Oh, yeah.
Or how he justifies what he's doing?
Yeah.
Even to himself?
Right.
These are all classic signs of neuroticism.
So we're seeing all these traits that a lot of people would consider abnormal, right?
Yeah.
But it's like all those traits, they don't just make him a monster.
Right.
They actually fuel this weird internal struggle he has
Totally.
between these dark urges he has and his desire to control them.
It's like they feed into his compulsions.
Yeah.
And, there's another tool that's used sometimes to assess these kinds of tendencies.
Oh, okay. What's that?
It's called Robert Hare's psychopathy checklist.
Interesting.
Now, a high score on this checklist doesn't automatically mean someone is a killer.
Right.
But Dexter does show some traits that line up with the checklist.
Okay. Like what?
Things like pathological lying, manipulating people, lack of remorse, thrill-seeking, shallow affect.
Interesting.
These are all hallmarks of a psychopathic personality.
So we're starting to paint this picture of Dexter as someone who's deeply troubled, potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
But there's also this other layer to it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Because sometimes the things he does suggest a totally different disorder.
You're right.
Okay.
Some of what Dexter does actually lines up with schizoid personality disorder.
Really?
Yeah, just think about it. Emotional detachment, limited range of emotions, preference for being alone.
Yeah.
Those are all key signs of schizoid personality disorder.
So is it possible that he's dealing with multiple disorders all at the same time?
Oh, it's absolutely possible.
Wow.
And that leads to another question.
Hmm.
Are these schizoid traits just there alongside his sociopathy?
Okay.
Or have they developed as a way to cope?
Okay.
Like maybe he's developed these tendencies as a way to manage those darker impulses.
Like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. Like he's built this wall
Yeah.
between his urges and everyone else.
Okay. So it's like he's built his own psychological prison.
Yeah.
But even with all this darkness,
Mm-hmm.
there are these glimmers of something else in Dexter.
Absolutely.
These moments where he seems to be able to care,
Yeah.
even if it's not always in like conventional ways.
Right. And those moments, they're what make the question of Dexter's humanity so interesting.
Yeah, they make you wonder.
Well, let's talk about those.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. So we're talking about these glimmers of humanity, these moments where Dexter's carefully constructed facade starts to crack.
I think his relationships are really where this shows up the most.
Like how he interacts with Debra, his adoptive sister, and Rita, the woman he eventually marries.
Yeah, Debra.
Right.
Throughout the whole series, he's just so fiercely protective of her.
Yeah.
Like he'd literally do anything to keep her safe.
I think a lot of that comes from his relationship with Harry,
Okay.
because protecting Debra, following the code, it's almost like he's trying to honor Harry, even though Harry's gone.
So it's like his humanity is being filtered through this very specific Harry-shaped lens?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And then you have Rita.
Right.
At first, Dexter's totally using her.
Yeah, he just needed a girlfriend to fit in.
Right, he needed to look normal.
Yeah, like it was part of his act.
But then things change.
Yeah, he starts to develop real feelings for her.
Yeah.
And even more so for her kids.
Mm.
Remember that scene where one of Rita's kids is getting bullied.
Oh, yeah.
And Dexter steps in, but he doesn't use violence.
Right.
It's this really surprising moment of gentleness from Dexter.
I think that scene perfectly captures how contradictory Dexter's character is. Yeah. Because he becomes this unlikely father figure.
Yeah.
He's fiercely protective of these kids.
Yeah.
And it makes you ask, can a monster, a serial killer, really be capable of love?
Right.
Of loyalty?
Yeah.
Of selflessness?
Yeah, it's what makes him so much more interesting than just a straight-up villain.
Exactly. He forces us to confront these ideas we have about good and evil. Like, is it all black and white?
Yeah.
Dexter shows us that it's all shades of gray.
Yeah, totally.
And it makes you wonder, can darkness and light exist in the same person?
Yeah.
At the same time?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the same soul?
And it's not just the things he does.
Right.
There are times when Dexter seems to feel genuine guilt.
Yeah.
Or he struggles with what he's done. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Like when he hesitates before a kill.
Right.
Or when he expresses regret afterwards.
I think those moments show that on some level, Dexter understands that what he's doing is wrong.
Okay.
Like even with his messed up moral code,
Yeah.
a part of him knows it's not okay.
Yeah, but he still can't seem to stop.
Right. It's like he's constantly battling himself.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this concept from Carl Jung called the shadow self.
Oh, yeah. A shadow self.
It's like this hidden part of your personality
Okay.
that have all these urges and desires that we try to hide.
Oh, so like the part of you that wants to eat an entire cake even though you know you shouldn't?
Exactly. It's the part we try to keep hidden from the world and even from ourselves.
Okay.
And for most people, that shadow self stays under control.
Right.
But for Dexter, it's taken over. It's in control and he can't really stop it.
But he's not totally consumed by it.
True.
There are those moments where he wants to be good or at least follow his code.
Right.
And that part of him comes through sometimes.
And that's what makes him relatable.
Yeah.
Because we all have a shadow self, even if it's not as extreme as Dexter's.
Yeah. Like we all have urges we're fighting.
Exactly.
Okay.
The difference is Dexter takes those urges to a whole other level.
A terrifying level.
Yeah.
So after looking at all of this, what can we really say about Dexter Morgan?
Right.
Is he a monster? Is he a hero? Or is he something in between?
I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
Dexter represents both sides of human nature.
Yeah.
He's capable of doing terrible things, but he can also be surprisingly compassionate.
It's so strange.
He's a walking contradiction, a reminder that even the most normal-seeming people can have dark secrets.
It makes you think about your own anxieties.
Yeah.
Like that fear we all have about the darkness that might be inside us.
It's like Dexter's world is morally complicated.
Yeah.
The lines between good and bad are blurred.
Yeah, they're definitely not clear.
And he makes you ask yourself some really uncomfortable questions.
Like what?
Like, what would you do if you had Dexter's urges?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Could you resist them?
Yeah.
Or would you give in to the darkness?
Those are questions that really stick with you,
They do.
even after you finish an episode or put the book down.
Dexter reminds us that the human mind is like this vast, unexplored territory.
Totally.
It's a place of incredible beauty,
Yeah.
but it can also be terrifying.
So we've talked about all this stuff about Dexter, but where do we land on that original question?
Yeah.
Is he totally without humanity?
You know, based on everything we've discussed, I think it's safe to say that Dexter does have some humanity.
Okay.
He's a moral code, even if it's twisted.
Right.
He feels guilt and regret sometimes, even if it's only for a moment.
Okay.
And he forms real bonds with people,
Yeah.
even if those bonds come from a dark place.
But that doesn't make him any less dangerous, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Just because he's capable of caring doesn't excuse what he does.
Yeah.
It just makes things even more complicated.
Yeah, adds another layer to this whole puzzle.
It shows us that the human heart can hold both love and hate at the same time.
Yeah, compassion and cruelty.
Exactly. And sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who can blur those lines.
Yeah, the ones who make us question what's right and wrong.
Right.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into Dexter's mind,
Okay.
what are some of the bigger questions our listeners should be thinking about? Like what will stick with them beyond this conversation?
I think the question that will really stay with them is this.
Yeah.
If someone like Dexter exists in fiction,
Yeah.
could they exist in real life?
Whoa.
Could someone with his exact mix of trauma,
Okay.
personality traits, and his twisted justification for killing?
Yeah.
Could someone like that be out there living among us without us even knowing?
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize that the monsters we're afraid of might not be hiding in the shadows. They might be living right next door, completely hidden in plain sight.
So we've spent all this time, looking at Dexter through all these different psychological theories, but there's one thing I keep coming back to.
What's that?
It's the code.
Well, the code, yeah.
Does the code make him more human? Or is it like the thing that actually pushes him further away from being human?
I think that's the big question, right? It's like
Yeah.
the code is both his savior
Okay.
and it's his downfall.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives him rules to follow.
Hmm.
It stops him from becoming like a totally random killer.
Yeah, it gives him that structure.
Right, but at the same time,
Isn't
isn't that part of the problem too?
Yeah.
It's like giving him permission to kill as long as he sticks to these rules.
Yeah, it's like a get out of jail free card for murder.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. He's figured out how to justify it to himself,
Yeah.
how to keep everything under control, and how to silence that little voice inside him.
The one that says, this is wrong.
Exactly. But the code doesn't really deal with the root of the problem, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No.
And, I'm starting to wonder if maybe the code is actually a way for Dexter to avoid real human connection.
Oh, wow.
Like real connection
Okay.
requires vulnerability.
Yeah.
You got to be intimate. And those are things that Dexter is terrified of.
It's almost like he built this wall of rules
Yeah.
to keep everyone at a distance.
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
Because maybe the code is like a replacement for real closeness.
Yeah, exactly.
And that might be like the saddest thing about Dexter.
Yeah.
Because they're people who really care about him.
Right, like Debra.
Debra,
Really.
or even some of the people he works with.
Mhm.
But Dexter can't truly let them in.
No, he can't.
It's like he's trapped
Yeah.
in this prison he built for himself.
Yeah.
A prisoner of his own twisted sense of right and wrong.
So he's this monster, but he's also kind of a tragic figure.
Yeah, he is.
It's like such a weird combination.
It really is. I think he's a warning
Okay.
about what can happen if you shut everyone out.
Yeah, you isolate yourself.
And you let those dark parts of yourself take over.
And it's a reminder that even people who seem like they have it all together, they might be fighting their own demons.
Right.
Dexter shows us that you can't always judge a book by its cover. Yeah. And I think Dexter's case also shows how limited psychology can be sometimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we can analyze what he does.
Yeah.
We could diagnose him with different disorders. But I don't think we can ever really truly understand how deep his darkness goes.
Wow.
Or why he does what he does.
But that's also what makes him so fascinating.
Totally.
He's like this walking embodiment of all the mystery of the human mind.
Yeah.
He constantly reminds us that we're all capable of both good and evil.
Exactly. He makes us question everything we think we know.
Yeah.
About
Right.
morality, about what it really means to be human.
And he reminds us that sometimes that line between being a hero and being a villain, or being sane and being insane,
Right.
it's way more fragile than we want to believe.
Much more fragile.
Dexter Morgan might be fictional,
Right.
but he asks questions that are very real.
Yeah.
Questions that we all have to wrestle with.
Absolutely.
He forces us to look inside ourselves, to confront those dark parts of ourselves.
Yeah. To accept that everyone has darkness inside them.
And by looking at Dexter's darkness,
Right.
we might actually understand our own humanity better.
That's what makes this whole exploration so powerful.
Yeah.
Even though it's fiction,
Yeah.
looking at these dark and complicated themes can teach us something really important about ourselves and the world.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Dexter's world,
Yeah.
what should we take away from all of this?
I think the big takeaway is this. Question everything.
Okay.
Don't just take things at face value.
Yeah, look deeper.
Exactly. And never underestimate just how complex the human heart really is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.